Artlist.io.
Ladies and gentlemen, the lights are on bright. It is time to dance. Welcome back to the show you live for. It is GINORMOUS. The date is Saturday, November 22nd. It is 12:34 a.m. and this is going to kind of tie into my point. For those who have not seen my Instagram post on the Conti and Nick Instagram, I really explained why I had such a long absence. First of all, I would like to apologize for that absence before I get into any further explanation. But I went through a change in my professional career, which really led to me getting a new schedule and kind of a new routine that I really was not used to. I'm not somebody who does the best with change very quickly. Things change in life, you go through transitions and it happens, but I like to kind of take that as methodically as I possibly can. And in this circumstance, changing professional careers, I was not able to take my time with that. So, kind of that transition was a little difficult for me. And in turn, Ginormous became a little bit of collateral. And once again, I would like to apologize because I do know that I have a fan base, and I do know that there were people who enjoyed listening and watching this show. And I would like to say to those who continue to offer their constant support throughout this little hiatus, I would like to say thank you. I would like to say that all of your support is always going to be recognized and cherished by me. And it really means a lot to know that there are going to be people who are always going to be by my side. So, with the sappy stuff out of the way, I really just want to get my bearings about me again. And I wanted to just turn the camera on and start talking about stuff that I felt good about, that I feel is relevant, and that I felt passionate about. And that in episode number 20, a little bit benchmark episode, is going to be about the Detroit Lions. Now, I watched the Detroit Lions this past Sunday. They faced the Philadelphia Eagles this past Sunday, and they're facing the New York Giants this upcoming Sunday. And there's one thing in particular that I wanted to talk about. Obviously, I'll talk about some other factors as well in regarding to the team. But there's one thing in particular that I wanted to talk about with the Detroit Lions, and that would be in Week 10, Dan Campbell taking over play calling duties for new offensive coordinator new this season, John Morton. He last year came from the Denver Broncos, was on the New York Jets previously as well, their coaching staff. And look, I think that when Dan Campbell took it over in Week 10 when they faced the Washington Commanders, they scored 44 points. Obviously, it looked pretty seamless, and it was something where it's like, oh, okay, Dan Campbell has a better grasp and a better grip of this offense, the personnel, and what they want. But you saw what happened when they went up against the reigning Super Bowl champions and looking like they have a solid, I wouldn't say they're the favorite, but they look like they do have a solid chance to at least come out of the NFC once again, Philadelphia Eagles, where they were held to 9 points. Now, a lot of that, I would say, obviously is on Dan Campbell and his decision making and poor decision making when it comes to taking points, going for it on fourth down, rolling the dice one too many times. And I think that factors into it very heavily. But before I kind of go into what I really think about this, I would just like to say I completely understand that it is well within the head coach's rights if he does not feel as though there is enough production or that there is something that he would like to see or is just not seeing the results that he has hoped for. He, as the head coach, is well within his right to take over the play calling duties on offense, or if he's a defensive coach, to take over the play calling duties on defense. I understand that that is well within his right and he can do it. But what I would like to challenge Dan Campbell on is when you hired John Morton, did you go into this hire with the expectation that he was going to be a replica or better or the same as Ben Johnson? Because if that was your expectation, which to me it seems like it was since you took over the play calling duties from him, I think you went into this with the wrong attitude. I think that Dan Campbell was feeling a little bit of pressure and a little bit of heat to capitalize while the window was still open. And in my opinion, this year, maybe next year, is one of the few years that, or that the window will be open. I think that last year was their best chance, but no one will be surprised if they get hot, make it to the Super Bowl, and win the Super Bowl. I don't think anybody would find that shocking if Detroit finally kind of got their wits about them and won it all. Even though, like I said, I believe last year was their best chance. I believe that Dan Campbell was kind of feeling a little bit of heat. He was feeling a little bit of pressure, and he decided to take matters into his own hands, take over the play calling duties for himself over John Morton. And I believe it was a mistake because you only gave John Morton 9 weeks to kind of figure out what it's like to be the offensive coordinator of a team and what a team that's competing for a Super Bowl. And in my opinion, if you weren't going to be confident in him, don't even give him the play calling duties to begin with, because in my opinion, when you make a change mid-season like this, so drastic to a team that has such high expectations, yes, Dan Campbell is the head coach. They all know, the team and the offense all knows what he's about, what he likes, and what he prefers for an offensive style. But I think that you're kind of throwing a monkey wrench into things and causing a little bit of distraction. Now, John Morton has gone on the record saying it's not about me. He fully supports Dan Campbell. He doesn't take it personally. But, you know, there has to be a certain sense of pride and a pride thing if you're John Morton. I guarantee you privately, I mean, unless that man has the patience of a saint, I guarantee you that man feels some type of way about it. And even though he may, obviously is not going to go on record and say things that are going to be hurtful to the team, I think the team is going to be, it did feel this past week. Obviously, they dropped 44 in week 10 against Washington, which is when Dan Campbell fully took over those play calling duties. But I do believe personally, mid-season to make a move like this, I think that causes a little bit of, I don't want to say dysfunction because I don't believe the Lions are dysfunctional. Obviously, they have a great culture and a great locker room, but I really do think that that makes things a little bit more complicated, brings a little bit of noise to your program that you otherwise would not have wanted. And I think that makes things just a little bit worse in the middle of the season to do this, right? And that really kind of is like the crux of my issue with this is the timing. Dan Campbell, like I said, is well within his right to do it, but when he did it, in my opinion, is the problem. And again, look, Detroit Lions, I think that they're supremely talented. They've drafted so well these past few years, which has allowed them to have this core that can compete for a championship any given year. They've locked up a lot of those guys. They're going to be facing, in my opinion, some cap issues, but I guess that's a great issue to have because you draft so well. But one thing that I also have noticed is what has been successful for them in the past was the duo of Gibbs and Montgomery. And it looks like they're leaning a lot more heavily on Jahmyr Gibbs this season. And again, like he is a supremely talented. I believe that this season, and especially these past few weeks, I'd say this past month, he's hit a whole new gear in his game, which I guess I understand from a coaching and play caller's perspective. You kind of need to, and you want to utilize that a lot more. You want to utilize a guy who's kind of just now hitting his complete stride and his maturity as a running back a few years into his career. So I do understand why you would want to take advantage and kind of milk that talent for what it is worth. But at the end of the day, what brought you to the dance and what made you successful was when it was a split backfield. And David Montgomery, I do not believe, and this is just purely the eye test. I'm not going to argue with any numbers that say it will be the same, but I don't believe that that 1-2 punch has been as prominent this year as it has been in different years. Now, look, I don't know if that's intentional, but I would hazard to say that it is, like I said, because Jahmyr Gibbs, in my opinion, has hit kind of that second, third gear that maybe Detroit was hoping for. I think right now he is just entering his true prime. He was a youngster. He was very raw. He was very talented. But you see the maturity, how the game is really slowed down for Jahmyr Gibbs, and how he doesn't have to rely on just his pure athleticism. Now he's able to read the blocks, read everything up front, read the defense. and really execute and kind of make the game played at his pace in his style, which is fast and is kind of like a controlled frenzy. But at the same time, he also has that level of maturity and that patience. So that's kind of just a small detail that I think about that factors into Detroit. But I'm going to read off to you just some scores here. Now, look, I know that scores and I know that final scores and points is kind of an imperfect measurement if you want to look at kind of how an offense is doing. I know there are a lot of advanced analytics. I know there are a lot of things that do factor into an offensive and team success. And obviously, defenses can score as well. So this isn't just going to be oh my God, they scored this many points, their offense is great thing, because I understand that there are a lot of factors that go into this. And like I said, it is imperfect. So going into this, I just want to kind of clarify that because I know there are going to be some other factors that go into this. But these under John Morton for the first 9 games of the season and only 9 games of the season that he is going to be play calling, these are the amount of points that the Detroit Lions have scored: 13, 52, 38, 34, 37, 17, 24, 24, and that's it. So you're looking at it, and again, like Detroit, if they went into this with the expectation that he was going to be Ben Johnson, they went into this with the wrong mindset. John Morton and Ben Johnson, in my opinion, was a special offensive coordinator. That's why obviously he got hired by the Chicago Bears, and I truly do believe that in time, even if it's with or without Caleb Williams, I do believe that right now the Chicago Bears are kind of hitting a little bit of a stride. I think things are starting to click for them, and I don't know how much it'll be in for sustained success. But I do believe right now Ben Johnson's mark is kind of being left on Chicago, and I think he's going to have some success there. I mean, I won't predict any Super Bowls, I won't predict anything like that, but I do think that Ben Johnson is going to make a competent team out of the Chicago Bears, and one that, even if, they're not Super Bowl contenders, they're going to be a team that you don't want to face. You're not going to be looking forward to playing against the Chicago Bears. A defensive coordinator is going to have nightmares going up against a Ben Johnson offense. That has always kind of been the case. And if you're Dan Campbell, and I've said this before already, but it seems to me, especially with those scores that I've been showing you, that for whatever reason, he was unsatisfied. There was a 40 piece in there, or almost a 40 piece. There was a 50 piece in there, multiple 30 pieces. Okay, a couple of duds here and there. But week one, 13 points against the Green Bay Packers, who have a very good defense. I don't understand what it was that John Morton was doing that Dan Campbell was not satisfied with. I don't really understand. The offensive line is still great. The weapons are still good. They added Isaac Tesla in the 3rd round, so they have another rookie who I believe is going to have a more prominent role as his career goes on. They have depth everywhere. They draft fantastic. This team is still great, and they still have that great Dan Campbell culture. But in my opinion, the problem is they play such a specific style of football where it's so aggressive. You go for it on 4th down all the time, and you kind of live and die by it. I would kind of equate it to the Boston Celtics and Joe Mazzulla shooting all those threes. You live and die by it. Hey, look, even if we're not making him, you're just going to keep shooting him. And look, it's worked out for Dan Campbell. It's kind of been a staple in that culture. And as a former coach myself, I do appreciate a coach who is going to be diehard to their commitment to going forward on 4th down, who's going to be, okay, this is our culture, this is what we are. But at a certain point in time, it's a double-edged sword, and you're going to fall on it sometimes. And when you do not believe you have the play calling and the coaching offensively that you want, and you want to take it over, sometimes I believe that you should take the more conservative option. And again, like I said, I do appreciate that Dan Campbell is living and dying by his culture, but it's going to come back to bite him. Okay, Philadelphia defensively last Sunday night, week 11, played fantastic, right? But Detroit, if they had just taken the points in a lot of cases, they had a very good chance to win that football game. Had they had executed on one of those 4th downs and then taken points in some other areas, we're not having this discussion. We're talking about Detroit being 2-0 since Dan Campbell took over, and I'm not having this podcast with this topic. I'm not talking about that. So I think that Detroit, and I've said this on week one, and then they proved me wrong for a while. I think Detroit has a lot of figuring out to do in terms of their offense. Their defense is still very good. Giving up 16 points to the Philadelphia Eagles is very good. Their defense played very impressive. I think offensively, Detroit has a lot that they have to figure out. And look, we'll see this week against the New York Giants. Giants have a good defensive line. Brian Burns is second in the league in sacks, so obviously that's something they're going to have to prepare for. We're just going to have to wait and see. And I'm going to make a post on Instagram if the Detroit Lions either lose or win but don't look great offensively, kind of an ugly, sluggish game. There is going to be a Instagram post for me. I know, so scary. If Detroit doesn't do well, they're going to hear it from me. They're going to hear it on Ginormous. Ooh, but Dan Campbell, you better watch out there, pal. You better make sure you throw it to Tesla. I'm on Raw. You better make sure you execute. But in all seriousness, I think that there's a serious discussion that needs to be had with the Detroit Lions if Dan Campbell, for the rest of the season, for that matter too, as well, kind of lays an egg when he takes over midseason the play calling duties of the offense. So that's really what I have to say today in this episode. It's not going to be a magnificently long one. I kind of just wanted to get my feet wet back again. And once again, guys, I would just like to appreciate all of you for your patience that you've had and kind of understanding that this hiatus that I took was because I did not want Ginormous to suffer in quality because something in my professional life was really kind of making me struggle and I wasn't going to be able to put my best foot forward. So instead of not being able to give the Ginormous the attention that she deserves, I kind of just went on a little hiatus. Once again, I would just like to thank all of you for understanding that and consistently supporting me. But other than that, Ginormous is a rolling train that sometimes comes out of commission, but it is back, baby. I would like to thank all of you for listening. Have a great rest of your day. Have a great weekend. And this has been Ginormous.